Let's take a look at recommendations 5 and 6. I mean, it is very interesting that this has always come up before. I mean, the source of the funds that the CBN injected into the banks when they were failing or when they failed in 2009 has always been a bone of contention between the CBN and the House of Representatives. At some point, I know that the CBN governor was invited to come and explain the source of funds. At another point, it seemed the matter was also taken to court. Now, we don't know what became of that matter in court, but again, it shows up here. Do you also think that this terse relationship could also have had an influence on what this recommendation is saying?
I don't think. Well, you continue to say terse relationship. As far as we are concerned, we are doing our job. We make recommendations. And then the executive arm jettisoned those recommendations. And I kept on saying, the Court of Appeal has already made a pronouncement on the status of resolutions passed by the National Assembly. In the case of Malam El Rufai versus House of Representatives, the Court of Appeal clearly stated that the legislative arm, being an arm of government, when it takes decision, it is not a mere statement of expression of opinion. It has a force of law. This is what the Court of Appeal said. That decision has not been reversed by the Supreme Court. Therefore, it is the law. We are doing our duty by making recommendations and passing resolutions. If anybody feels he's above the law, Nigerians are watching him. The entire world are looking at him, whether he is a Democrat or not. If he can dish out, instructions, make policies, nobody questions him. Then an arm of government as important as the legislative arm will now take a decision, then you throw it aside and say that it is not important. I mean, we're not helping the growth of democracy in this country.
Writing a 5-page document is a Herculean task for some, let alone this 88-page document. Well, let's look at AMCON now. AMCON, one other agency there, which before now, we felt AMCON has taken over those 3 banks, but you say your finding has shown that those banks were not for AMCON, but for 2 individuals. Did you call AMCON to get clarifications on the nationalization of these 3 banks?
Well, the Committee on Banking and Currency equally said they were availed with documents that tend to say it was an interim measure by bringing in certain individuals. Now they have documents from Corporate Affairs Commission to show that AMCON owns 100% of these companies or banks. And that baffles us too. If we can go apply to Corporate Affairs Commission, who are the custodians of all documentations that have to do with companies, whether limited or PLC, and we applied, we discovered what we discovered, and then made our recommendations, then another committee will now come and tell us that, look, we have those documents. We are waiting for it. We are going to harmonize those issues. These are issues that have not been resolved. They have been, stood down by the National Assembly. So I'm not going to comment much on that.
But again, another issue is your recommendations. I have to tie that with the appeal court ruling, which says it has the force of law. But again, for loads of Nigerians, they still believe, even lawyers, they say, well, the National Assembly is not a court. So sometimes when you bring out your recommendations or your, should I say, report on any matter, specifically on this particular matter, they say it's just a matter that should be looked at maybe twice or thrice. If we have to marry that with what we got from the Attorney General of the Federation, he did say, well, the government has to also do its own double check before they implement anything if they have to.
I beg to disagree with that position. Once a resolution is passed, they have no option but to comply. If they feel, so particular about those resolutions, their only option is to go to the judiciary to challenge those resolutions.
Such documents can be challenged in courts.
Yes.
That's what you say.
Nothing stops them. That's the doctrine of separation of power. The executive will do something, the legislator will do something, the judiciary will now interpret if there are frictions between the executive and legislative arm. So if they feel particular about a resolution or an issue, then let them go to court and challenge it. Nothing stops them. We are not saying don't go to court. There is no ouster clause as regards to the action or steps they should take. But for them to come and say, we are going to review what you have done, I think is wrong.
The shareholders body in Nigeria, they have an association. I remember we saw them with the first panel before that particular issue happened, before we saw it being disbanded. Were they also invited during this sitting of your own pro panel?
Obviously, a lot of them appeared.
And what did they say about the banks as well as the investments?
Well, they said so many things about the banks, margin loans that have no regulations. They guided us properly, and they are so particular about their being divested of their investment in shareholdings of companies, particularly those banks. Shareholders were very, very bitter about it. But we were very dispassionate. We looked at the facts and figures before us and then made appropriate recommendations.
I'm glad you said you were very dispassionate about it, because people will all have written that some of the shareholders, some of the executives of the shareholders have an axe to grind with the DG of SEC. That is why most of them will come before you and say things that are not just true. So whatever they said to you, did you double check and cross check to see if they were actually true?
Yeah, we cross checked most of those issues, and we equally requested for documents. If you look at the methodology of the entire exercise, is that we don't only depend on oral evidence or documents alone. We equally go into the archives to check at and cross-check at documents that will assist us.
Do you usually use consultants during probes?
Obviously, nothing stops us. We don't have monopoly of knowledge, and therefore we take consultants to assist us.
Yeah, the reason I ask this question is some people feel that your consultants or some of your consultants could have also been people who had different interests. What influence would you say your consultants had on the final recommendations that you came up with?
To be very honest with you, our consultants made their submissions, but the final report and recommendation was absolutely within our powers, and therefore we took charge of it and we take responsibility for the recommendations we made. We were not influenced by consultants.
Okay, now let's take a look at some of the, you've also cited AMCON here, the DG of AMCON here for contempt, saying that you asked him to bring you some documents, which he didn't produce. But the AMCON DG, he called in one of our breakfast shows, Business Morning, and he said that some of those documents, he doesn't even have them in his possession, and he cannot produce that. All the documents he had in his possession that you asked for, he brought forward, but the ones he didn't have, he couldn't have brought.
Well, as far as I can remember, there were two sets of letters. There was a confusion in the first instance by the secretariat, by our own secretariat, whereby certain questions that were supposed to have been directed to CBN and other outfits were mixed up in AMCON's, letter, and they promptly replied and reacted to those questions, pointing out to us that it is not within their powers to answer those questions, or they ought not to have been directed to them. They made it very clear. And I had, reason to summon the secretariat on why the mix-up. And we rectified that and then sent in appropriate letters that were directed to them. Yet we did not get those replies. We have all the facts.